Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's David Fowles. I'm a local businessman based here in Cirencester, and I run a small advertising and marketing company. And like many of us, my work has completely dried up, so I have no work whatsoever. And I share the frustrations and concerns that lots of people have been sending in to our MP. And I'm delighted to have here today Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, MP for the Cotswolds, who's joining us for our second live stream here at the Barn Theatre. This is going to be a regular live stream that Sir Geoffrey's holding every Friday afternoon, where we're taking questions from businesses and members of the public. And I'd like to reiterate our thanks from last week to the Barn Theatre for letting us hold this facility. One big difference this time compared with last week, which is last week I sat beside Sir Geoffrey. Today I'm more than 2 meters away from him. So good afternoon, Sir Geoffrey. Welcome to the Barn Theatre.
Hello. David, can I thank you again for comparing this event? Can I thank everybody at the Barn Theatre? I think last week we had somewhere around 3,500 people contact us online. So clearly this is a forum where a large number of people are tuning into. And I've already had a huge number of emails each day, and we've done our best to respond to all of these, but if there are some we haven't responded to, please be a little patient. As you can imagine, demand has been huge. So this afternoon, I think we have a range of questions. I thought I'd just make a few opening remarks just to sort of set the scene, and I'm very happy to answer any questions on any subject you care to put to me, and have indeed on a number of you put questions to me. If I don't know the answers, I will find them out and come back to you online, and let's take it from there. So a few opening remarks. As of this morning, according to Public Health England, there were 11,658 confirmed cases of COVID virus in the UK, with 64 of those falling into our local authority in Gloucestershire. And sadly, there have been 578 confirmed deaths in the UK, in which, unfortunately, one has been in Gloucestershire. So the guidance is really important that we adhere to that, and therefore I'm going to restate it. The guidance is to stay at home, to protect the NHS, but above all, to save lives. You must stay at home, only leaving for the following very limited purposes: shopping for bare necessities as frequently as possible, one form of exercise a day, for example, a run, walk or cycle, alone with members of your immediate household, any medical need to provide care or to help the vulnerable people, travelling to and from work, but only where this is absolutely cannot be done from home. And I have to say the people of the Cotswolds have responded to this guidance fantastically, and they've taken the guidance very seriously, and I'd like to thank everyone for adjusting their lives so dramatically and so quickly. The government does not take lightly these strict measures, but if we all listen to the advice being given and make our own sound judgments on how we live during this challenging period, the sooner we will be able to beat this invisible enemy and we can get our lives and businesses back to normal. There has been an incredible response rate to the call for national NHS volunteers, with 660,680 signing up to the volunteer helpline in the last couple of days. The support people can provide includes community response volunteer, patient transport volunteer, NHS transport volunteer, and check-in and chat volunteer. And there is a helpline for that. And after this event, I will be circulating not only a copy of these opening remarks, David, but also some of the important health lines with telephone numbers on them. So please don't worry if I don't give you the numbers, or if I do and you can't take them down. I suppose it would be worth focusing on the very important announcement that the Chancellor made last night on the package of help for the self-employed, which could be worth up to £9 billion. The Self-Employed Income Support Scheme has been launched to make sure people who work for themselves, unlike the coronavirus employment support scheme, people who work for themselves are getting the financial support they need. The government will pay self-employed people across the whole of the UK who have been adversely affected by coronavirus a taxable grant worth 80% of their average monthly profits over the last 3 years, up to a maximum of £2,500 a month for 3 months, but it will be extended if necessary. We will make it simple for the self-employed to get the financial support they need. If those who are eligible will be contacted by HMRC directly and asked to fill out a simple online form, and HMRC will pay the grant directly into their bank account. We expect people across the scheme to access the scheme by the beginning of June. We are ensuring that our support reaches those self-employed people who are most in need of it. Therefore, the scheme will only be open to those trading with profits up to 50,000, leaving 95% of the people who are the majority of the self-employed eligible for the scheme. HMRC will also ask people to demonstrate the majority of their income comes from self-employment, and to minimise fraud, only those who are already in self-employment and who have a tax return for 2019 will be eligible to apply. So other measures. The police have new enforcement powers passed by the coronavirus bill in Parliament this week to ensure people stay at home. The new powers will protect the public and keep as many people as possible safe from the coronavirus. Now, I know some people are worried about that guidance and the inconsistency of police forces around the United Kingdom in how they're applying it, and I will be having a conference call with the police tomorrow to see how it's working in Gloucestershire. Secondly, the government will provide free car parking to all NH staff at hospitals, and local councils will offer free car parking to all NHS workers, social care staff and NHS volunteers during the coronavirus outbreak, as part of our efforts to ensure health workers have whatever they need during this unprecedented time. The NHS has asked up to 1.5 million extremely vulnerable people to stay at home to shield themselves from coronavirus for 12 weeks. So it is incumbent on the rest of us to make sure they are looked after during this time. And indeed, those 1.5 people will shortly receive a communication to say that they are in this vulnerable category. Now, if there are communities out there who know of somebody who hasn't received a communication, probably somebody who's got severe health problems, but perhaps not in the over 70 age bracket, then we should make sure that that is reported in as well, so that we can make sure that they are constantly monitored. The government launched a coronavirus information service on WhatsApp. It is free to use and aimed at providing trustworthy and up-to-date information. To use the free gov.uk Coronas information service on WhatsApp, simply add, and I'll give you a number here, but it'll be on my sheet, 07860 064422 in your phone contacts, and then message it to the word hi in a WhatsApp message to get started. That's in addition to the UK .gov website as well, which I gave out details of last week, which is, I think, an incredibly helpful source of information on a huge variety of subjects to do with corona, and is updated daily. There's a lot of information on there. So, David, with those few opening remarks, and again, thanks to you, and thanks sincerely to the Barn Theatre and all their staff for making this consultation possible.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Just to say, if you haven't already worked out, if you're wanting to send in your questions, you can send them in on the live stream, and they're being picked up by you, Anne, and forwarded on to Sir Geoffrey. Or indeed, you can continue to use the email address, which is contact@cotswoldbusinessspeaks.co.uk. So either live stream in your questions or email. But for speed, it would be great if you could just live stream them in, and they'll come straight through to us. We've had a few questions coming in over the last few days, and we're going to take them, as we did before, in chronological order. And we're going to start, if we may, Geoffrey, with a question from James Heyman Joyce, who runs an estate agent's business in Moreton in the Marsh. And James's question is, would Sir Geoffrey comment on the anomaly, which is that he's already raised, whereby all high street shops are given 100% discounts on their business rates, but estate agents get no discount at all? Has he been able to raise this with the minister who is responsible, and who may be able to amend the regulations as a temporary measure?
Well, I think that, I don't know when that question was received, but I think the advice...
That was 24th of March.
Yes, I think the advice has been updated since then, James, and I think you'll be pleased to know that estate agents, amongst other few categories, will now get rates relief.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Geoffrey. Next question is from Leanne Launchbury, who runs the Bourton Vale Equestrian Centre. And her question is, I have furloughed 2 members of staff rather than lay them off. If the government reneges on its promise to cover the 80% of their wages that I will have already paid out, my 21-year-old business will collapse. Is the furloughing payment guaranteed?
Provided that the conditions are met in the scheme, the furloughed scheme is absolutely guaranteed. The Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, as it's officially known, Leanne, it's absolutely guaranteed. The top-up bit of it, the 20% top-up, is entirely at the discretion of the employer. But I must issue a warning about it. If you furlough employees, they must not do any work for your business. This is regarded as a temporary layoff payment. They can do volunteering, but they must not work for your business in any way.
Thank you. Third question, which we've received, is from Rosemary McGrother, who runs a company called Britain Express Limited. And there's 2 parts to this question. Can employees that are also directors of companies be laid off and receive government reimbursement for 80% of their salaries? Our company cannot continue to pay the directors minimal salaries without going out of business. We are a family business with 2 employees who are also directors, and the whole of our family income is dependent on the salaries paid by the business. Would you like to answer that question first, and I'll give you the second part of it in a minute?
Yes, thank you, David. Rosemary, so the answer to that question is, at the moment, only those employees or directors that are paid under a PAYE scheme. So some directors are paid under a PAYE scheme, and they will be covered by the scheme. Those directors that take their remuneration in the form of dividends are not covered at the moment, but there has been quite a lot of discussion about this, and of course there is a maximum cap on the scheme.
Thank you. The second part of her question is it possible for directors to be partly on furlough? There are minimal things that still need to be done to keep the company ticking over, such as filing the VAT return and ensuring the website is still running. It hasn't been hacked, etc., etc. These will take very little time, but still need to be done to keep the business running. It is my understanding that the government wants businesses to be able to stay in business. Being able to lay off directors would enable our business to stay in business.
So I think, given the previous advice that I was very clear to give the warning about, that you must not do any work for the company if you are furloughed, that would probably cover this situation. But Rosemary, if you would care to give me an email directly at cliftonbrown.g.second@parliament.uk, I will happily look into your individual circumstances and give you an answer.
And as you said earlier, those email addresses and phone numbers will be made
on
available.
On the fact sheet, indeed.
Okay. This is a question from Chris Cleal, beg your pardon, Chris. This was from last week, but we didn't get to answer it, so you did suggest that we feed in questions from last week as well. Will the council be using the government website to calculate the small business grants, or will it be calculated using rates paid in 2019? Some businesses that rent off the council directly have their rates included in their rent without itemisation on their bills. How will this be calculated?
So I think that the councils will be issuing the relevant rate rebate invoices, and as part of that, given that there are 2 different schemes, one for renters and one for rebates on business rates, I think the council will have to separate them out, and I think that the renting scheme to protect commercial tenants will equally apply to council properties as it will to ordinary private individual commercial landlords.
Okay. This is a really interesting question from Cressida Landless, because she's noticed, as have many of us, that the weather has improved since the virus struck, and we've had some beautiful spring days. So her question is, hello, Now that we are beginning to see an improvement in the environment and a massive lowering of the pollution levels around the world due to the lessening of traffic and air traffic, do you envisage this trend being encouraged after the coronavirus has diminished or disappeared?
Well, I was having a conference call with the farmers just now, and their spirits were greatly cheered up by this improved weather. They're all out on the land or tending their stock, and they're feeling much happier. Not totally happy, because a lot of their markets are collapsing, but they are much happier than they were, and I think we'll all love to see the sun after a rather long, dreary winter. I think this is one of the real bonuses, one of the only bonuses of this corona disaster, is the fact that we are all not using so many emissions into the environment. And I think it will be a real lesson, salutary lesson to all of us, how we reorganize our lives in the future, having had the experience of not using emissions, whether it be our cars or whatever, as much as we did previously, and make us really think what we can actually do without in life. And as you say, I think you'll find the total emissions in the world, let alone in this country, will be considerably down during these next few months.
Thank you. The next question is from Courtney Hockley, and Courtney runs the photography business, Courtney Louise Photography. It's quite a long question. And as with all these questions, this is the first time I've seen some of these, so if I stutter on occasions, please bear with me. Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. Thousands of small, director-only, home-based businesses who operate as limited companies have not been given the same financial help given to employees and the self-employed by the government during the COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown. In many instances, the only difference between directors of small limited companies and the self-employed is the fact that they have taken the legal option to operate through a limited company. With the combination of corporation tax and income tax, the amount of tax paid is very similar to that paid by someone self-employed and making the same profits. Self-employed individuals can receive a grant and still operate the business. For directors to obtain a grant, they have to furlough themselves and not to do any work, which in many cases would mean letting their businesses go completely. I am a wedding photographer. I have been a wedding photographer all my adult life for the last 14 years. I was a sole trader up until 2016 when I went limited. I have a very busy diary, peaking mainly April to September, and as of 2 weeks ago have had to postpone all my weddings from March to mid-June, and I suspect it will get worse, meaning I have zero income for the foreseeable future. As a director of a limited company, I am the camp of being furloughed. Now, does this mean I can't do any work? No social media, no emails, and no phone calls. If I was in this position as a self-employed photographer, I could undertake all this work and still get a grant. This really isn't right. We have definitely been overlooked. I can name hundreds of others in this industry that operate in the same way. As a single director of a limited company, we really feel we have been let down here. And that's, I urge you to please address this. If we need to furlough ourselves and not be able to do any admin to keep our premises online, to keep our businesses going, keep our future clients happy, there will be no business at all. Within a matter of days, weeks, we will have gone under. Please, please address this and help us. We have been working so hard to get these businesses off the ground, and the threat of losing this all is very real, and we're worrying about having to close now. Please call me if you wish to ask any questions about my position. And that's from Courtney.
So, Courtney, I haven't heard your question before, and I was looking to see whether there was any advice on limited companies. I know that this is a subject that has been discussed, and I cannot give you a definitive answer at this moment, but if David will have forwarded me your email, and I can assure you that I will look into this and get back to you as soon as I have an answer. It would seem logical for the people doing the same sort of work but are in a different trading vehicle, i.e. a limited company as opposed to a self-employed business, that they should be given the same help. And I believe that may be the case, but I stress it may. I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to check it, and I'd like to come back to you with a definitive answer.
Thank you, Sherry. But this is a theme that we've seen develop since last week, which is people who know that they can't work, and in a category like photographing weddings, obviously you have no business, but they have to keep their businesses going in the event of, hopefully very soon, them being able to restart their businesses, and what can they do in the interim to keep their businesses going and ticking over.
I absolutely understand the point. I understand Courtney's predicament, and that is why I'm keen to look into it. As you say, the government, basically the whole thrust of these measures is to enable businesses to still be there once we get to the other side of this whole dreadful coronavirus, and I would be very surprised if there wasn't some help for limited companies, but I'd like to check it.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. Let me just get to this next question. Sorry. And this is from Nicolina Zarola, and her question is, please could you pass on the following question to Sir Geoffrey? Since the cancellation of mass gatherings, our sales have dropped drastically, not enough to cover the cost of rent, rates, stock purchased, bills, etc. We welcome the small business grant and loan to help manage these costs. We are a self-employed limited company and have 2 directors. We have a family of 4 to look after. Our wages consist of just over £700 a month each, which is the personal tax allowance plus a dividend. The new scheme announced last night means we are entitled to only the tax-free allowance and that the dividend isn't included, even though that's the taxable part of our wages. We have arranged for our mortgage holiday, but the amount this new scheme offers doesn't even cover our food costs, let alone our bills. The separate business grant only covers rent, rates, stock, bills for a business premises that isn't in use, as even though we are an online retail business, our market isn't needed as people are staying in. Please could you request that dividends are included for limited companies in the new self-employed coronavirus allowance? Otherwise, obviously the same rules apply, 80% and up to £2,500 per month. And that question is from Nicolina.
So, Nicolina, there's quite a lot to be said about this, and I understand your predicament. The reason that you and thousands of people like you draw part of your earnings from your self-employment in dividends rather than as a direct payment is that it saved you some tax, basically. And the Chancellor, in framing this scheme, felt that it was only those people that paid the full tax on their income that should be given the benefit of the scheme. The other point about dividends is that there is no way of the government distinguishing on a tax returns whether the dividend is from that particular business or any other dividend from any other business. So there was an element of possible fraud involved in this. I will make representations to the government on dividends. There has been quite a lot of traffic between MPs and ministers over this over the last 24 hours or so. And we'll have to just see where we get to. But there are problems with including dividends.
Okay, thank you. So another question is again from Cressida, but I think you were quite keen to answer this one. We have seen so many new houses being built in the Cotswolds, and my question is, should there now be a restriction on second homes given the possible need to restrict movement of people? And perhaps this could be a way of avoiding so much need to build new houses and maintaining reduction in pollution. This is to do with the whole issue of second homes.
So we do need to build more homes in the Cotswolds. We do need to build more affordable housing in the Cotswolds. The Cotswolds has some of the highest housing as a ratio to wages of anywhere in the southwest. Whether we should restrict second homes, whether that would help the market, I don't know. I think at the moment the property market is going to take an awful dive, and what we're going to need to do, I think as quickly as possible, once this whole dreadful virus is over, or we've largely got on top of it, is to get the house building industry working as quickly as possible. I think the matter of second homes is something we will need to watch quite carefully and just see where the balance lies in all of this. As regards to whether people should move to a second home if they have one in the Cotswolds, I think that perhaps needs clarifying. And now there are different categories of people involved in moving. I think those short-term renters, i.e. the Airbnb type scheme, definitely should not be coming to the Cotswolds because they risk bringing the virus with them and putting the local services under further threat. Those that have second homes or are long-term renters who have already arrived in the Cotswolds, clearly it would be impractical to ask them to return to wherever they came to from their main home. Those that haven't yet come to their second home or their rented home should heed the government advice very carefully and consider whether their journey into the Cotswolds is really, really necessary or not.
Well, I know that you obviously, as many MPs, have a constituency home and one in London. And I personally was very pleased that you came down here as quickly as you could because in talking to you about it, you felt that the place for you to be was to be here with your constituents. Virtual contact notwithstanding and social media, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you here in the Barn Theatre. It would all be live streamed somewhere else. So we're pleased to have you here because we know you're up the road, and I'm pleased that you're here, and I hope other MPs are back in their constituencies rather than in Westminster, because this is where you're needed. So thank you for answering that question.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question is to do with, it's from Kath, and she, again, Kath runs a business called My Danish Wardrobe. She asked the question last week but missed the slot, so we did agree with her that you'd ask the question again, or she'd ask the question again, sorry. In regards to the COVID-19 for small businesses, there's one major flaw in our leases, which we are all holding personal liability. This is a major thing for small independent businesses and gives us major anxiety, and on top of the Brexit bad trade in general on the high street, is this some kind of old-fashioned flaw as landlords are holding large deposits too? Maybe the law can be changed with regards to personal liability.
Well, I think as regards commercial rents, the government's already been quite clear on this. Those that are running into difficulties in paying their commercial rent because of a proven problem with coronavirus will be given leniency on that matter. So I don't think that Kath needs to worry too much about the personal liability at the present time. If she's thinking about it more generally, that is something we will need to consider post-corona. But let's get over this particular period first of all.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The next question is from Denise Cleal. And Denise's question is, I'd like to ask a question of Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. What's happening about people who are employed on 0 hours contracts? As PAYE employees, would they be eligible for an 80% of last year's salary? But they're on 0 hours.
The simple answer is yes. Those on 0 hours, those who are employed and those who work for employment agencies will be able to claim the coronavirus retention scheme.
Great. I wish all the questions were as easy to answer as that and as positive. We've got 3 questions here. These are coming through on the live stream. So all those questions, just for everybody who's watching, were questions that have arrived via email. We're now moving into live streaming, which is great. The first question is from Sarah Favell. How on earth did your government manage to miss joining the large EU procurement exercise for vital health supplies that was announced on television last night? We could still have joined as a Brexit transition period still running, but now we'll have to make smaller and more expensive deals with suppliers. Do you have an answer to that?
Well, to be honest, a simple answer is I don't know. I was listening, like you were, presumably, to Alex Sharma this morning on the Today programme, and he said that the EU did not notify the UK until after the event. Now, I have simply no way of knowing whether that's correct or not, whether it would have helped us with our procurement. Nevertheless, having said that, I know the government is in very close to be able to providing a very large amount of personal protective equipment. That's being rolled out now. We've heard this morning that Dyson is going to make a large numbers of ventilators, so the ventilator situation is also being rolled out. I think the real problem with ventilators is actually going to be the number of trained health professionals that know how to use them, because not just anybody can use a ventilator and look after it properly. So I think whilst I think the NHS is is preparing to undergo a massive effort. We'll have to just see how that all pans out. And it's important too that the PPE gets not only to the NHS, but it goes to the social care sector, the nursing and residential home sector, to make sure that all those people who are working with vulnerable people and people who may well have the virus are properly protected. That is really important.
I think we all saw what James Dyson is doing, and as everybody knows, Malmesbury's just down the road from here, your neighbouring constituency, but it's in the Cotswolds as well. So even though it's James Gray, it's certainly on our doorstep.
There will be people in the Cotswolds who will be working on those ventilators.
So well done to them.
Fantastic news, it really is.
And I gather McLaren are also doing something similar, which is
too.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Next question is from Keely Ann. Will the council tax allowance that has been given to local governments be shared equally to reduce council tax for everyone during these challenging times? That's from Keely Ann.
Well, the government is certainly giving help to local councils. I had a conference call with them this morning. Where there is council tax allowance to those councils and where people can prove that they have suffered loss due to the corona, let me stress that none of these schemes are supposed to be just as a general subsidy. The taxpayer is going to have a job of enough to pay back what we have already offered. It is supposed to be to tide people over during the course of this coronavirus where they have suffered loss of income due to their job being curtailed or furloughed or whatever. So yes, I think if there is council tax rebate available and you have suffered loss, there should be help.
Great. This next one's directed to you personally about social media. Complimenting you for this programme, but making the comment that will you engage more on social media instead of just using this one outlet? How about you having your own Facebook page? I think it's more a general question about you and social media. Do you have a view on your
I
use
do
of
have a
social
view. One can always do better on social media, and I think that actually one of the plus sides, if there is a plus side of this coronavirus, is that we've all got used to using social media much more, to a much greater extent. I'm finding I'm spending far more time over one machine or another, one electronic machine or another, than I have virtually any time before. So the answer to that question is emphatically yes. If we can reach 3,500 people in a virtual conference like this last Friday, it shows the power of social media, and therefore one would be stupid not to use it more.
Well, I had that experience yesterday when I contacted the Barn Theatre to ask them for help to set up a Facebook page, and they helped me, and then they ended the conversation by saying, "We have other things to do, David. Why don't you try and learn the technology yourself?" So I'm delighted to say that I took those words to heart, and I have learned, but I'm still asking them lots of questions.
Perhaps you can teach others.
Perhaps I could. This question is from Philip Nixon. And Philip Nixon runs a firm of chartered accountants and registered auditors. Reference COVID-19 support. Self-employed. The information released today says the self-employed support will be based on trading profit. It then goes on to say that references will be made to the information on tax returns. What profit figure will be used? Will it be trading profit or taxable profit? The biggest difference is normally capital allowances. Given this support is aimed at micro businesses, the purchase of a vehicle, for example, will have a huge impact on this COVID-19 assistance. That's the first question, and I'll ask the second one in a minute. So that's from Philip Nixon.
Well, the first thing to say about it is it won't be 1 year's profits, whether it's trading or whether it's taxable. It will be averaged out over 3 years.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, although I'm not absolutely certain, and I would need to check the point, that it will be on taxable profits. But I would need to check that point, and what I will do is check it and
come back
to him with an answer.
Second part is job retention scheme. The requirement for 3 weeks on furlough is understandable, but many micro businesses such as plumbers, electricians, locksmiths, etc. are going to be unfairly penalised. Most of their work is non-essential. However, some is essential. Following Monday's announcement, micro businesses have been required to put most staff on furlough, but the rules as released today will deny the 3 weeks of furlough support if an employer is called out for 1 day to deal with an emergency. So there you have a real problem, particularly with people who are in the trades, electricians, plumbers, locksmiths, where they do and still are operating emergency call-out services.
I think it's a really good point, Philip, and I will check it, and I will come back to you on that as well.
Next question is from a manager of a local hotel, the Crown of Cruces. What support is given, if any, to local small businesses for them to recover in this crisis?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Could we have a name?
Sorry, it's Gabriella. I apologise. I know Gabriella, so I kind of assumed.
David briefed me, Gabriella, before we came online, that you have just purchased the Crown of Cruces.
Well, the owners have. She just runs it, but they purchased it a month ago.
So that must be very difficult for all of you, and I hope you managed to weather the storm. The question was, what help is there available? I mean, there are lots of things that we haven't even begun to touch on this morning, although we did touch on some of them last week. Things like mortgage holidays, the business interruption loan scheme, the rates rebate. So there are considerable amount of help for businesses, deferring tax payments, deferring VAT, help with tax advice from HMRC. There is an awful lot out there. I would urge you to go on the gov.uk website, have a look, and see what schemes will help your owners. As regard yourself or other employees, it may be that the coronavirus job retention scheme, the 80% payment, might help, or it may be that some of you are self-employed and that may help. But if you still have particularly difficulties, or you want to know which scheme might help you, if you would give me quite some detail of your individual circumstances, I will endeavour to find the answers out.
Okay. Not only are the Barn Theatre providing this facility, but they also would like to ask you a question.
Right, indeed.
And this is from Yuan Lewis, the Artistic Director.
That's not from me, David.
Sorry, apologies. I can't work out who it's from on this. Do you know where it's from?
Just ask the question.
Okay, apologies. Sorry, Yuan. Thank you for that. It tells that we're live anyway. With the current government support packages, could you explain why a director owning a company, because I can't furlough myself, is not able to qualify for COVID-19 support, but a furloughed employee and self-employed worker can? Apologise about that. Just to restate the question, Yuan's just sent it to me because he's operating the live stream. With the current government support packages, could you explain why a director owning a company, because I can't furlough myself, is not able to qualify for COVID-19 support, but a furloughed employee and self-employed worker can?
Well, I don't think the premise of the question is quite right, because I am under the impression that a director can be furloughed if they are drawing wages under a PAYE scheme as opposed to a dividend. But perhaps we could take this offline afterwards and discuss it, and if I can't give you a satisfactory answer, then I will endeavour to find an answer.
Okay. This is from Milan Lester, lives here in Cirencester. Freelancers and the employed get help. Company directors do not. Could you please explain this inequality?
Well, again, if the company director is drawing their wages under a PAYE scheme, they will get help, and provided they qualify, they're below the limits. But clearly, if they are drawing some form of dividends or profit share or something else, they won't get help. So I think, again, it's a little difficult to comment on that question without knowing the individual advice and individual circumstances. I apologise.
Right. Okay, next question is from Steve Makin. Dividends aren't tax-free. You have to make a profit, which is subject to corporation tax before the dividend is paid. Okay, that's just a statement more than a question.
I
agree
accept
with
that.
Yep. Okay, this is from Tony Antoniou.
So just let's stop on that, David. I'm not quite sure what the point that Steve is
Dividends aren't tax-free. You have to make a profit, which is subject to corporation tax before the dividend is paid. That's what he's saying.
Yes, but it's different from drawing your wages under a PAYE scheme, and there are difficulties, as I say, preventing fraud, because you don't know whether the dividend, which is declared on the tax return, is from that particular company or any other dividend as well. So the government has, at the moment, excluded dividends from the scheme.
Okay. And the next question, well, this is actually indirectly from you, Anne, because this is from someone who's saying, his name's Tony Antonio, and he's saying, can Sir Geoffrey do a dedicated live stream for the constituents and not just the businesses? And I know that's something the Barn Theatre feels strongly about, and you were going to announce at the end of this live stream that from now on the live streams are obviously open to both residents and businesses. And indeed, you've taken any question from residents, but they have tended to be business focused. So yes is the answer to that, Tony. That's something the Barn Theatre want to do, it's something Sir Geoffrey wants to do, and we're going to do it.
So as from next Friday,
it's open to
anybody
everybody.
will be able to ask any question related to coronavirus, and I'm happy
That's right,
to do
and
that.
there'll be an email address which is contact@cotswoldspeaks.co.uk,
And we'll
or
have
you
to-
can live stream on
and
the
we'll
day.
see how it goes, what the demand is
Yeah.
as to the timing
Yeah.
we need for future Fridays.
Yeah, absolutely. This is from Jan Smit, and it's what help is available for companies that fall into the category of businesses with property with a rateable value between 15,000 and 51,000, but are not in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, according to CDC. We have been told that we are not eligible for this grant by CDC Cotswold House and Fittings. Okay, this is from Cotswold Hose and Fittings. Okay.
I would like to check that. I'm very hesitant to contradict the advice being given by the Cotswold District Council. I was under the impression now that all businesses could qualify for this rate relief. So if we could have your details, Jan, I will look into that and give you an answer.
I'll make sure you get those.
Yeah.
This is from Steve Macon, which is expanding on his statement earlier. Dear Sir Geoffrey, hope you and your family are keeping well in these difficult times. I certainly hope so.
I feel fully fit, I'm glad to say, at the moment.
Great.
And
your fiancée, I hope, and your children.
They're all fully fit at the moment.
Great. And I'm hoping Steve is as well. I'm a freelance cameraman operating through a limited company. Due to the way we invoiced TV stations in the mid-1990s, you'll find most cameramen, editors and presenters operate through limited companies. I have been working in the industry for over 30 years and during this time have paid millions of pounds in income tax, corporation tax, national insurance contributions and VAT to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I don't rent premises, so based from home. I know of 5 just like me in Cirencester, and if you take other sectors into account, there must be millions of us in the country. We pay ourselves a basic salary and then take dividends, typically quarterly, depending upon how the company is performing. As there has to be a profit before you take these, they are basically taxed at 20%. From my understanding, we'll only be able to claim 80% of our basic pay, which will be about £570 a month. On the 3rd of April, I have a £297 council tax bill to pay, utility bills, food for 4 people, business insurance, car insurance and a myriad of other bills. I have stopped my pension contributions, but management fees are still taken monthly to the fund, otherwise it will go down. My main business was filming football, cricket, triathlons and corporate conferences, so I have to work. So I have no work at the moment. At the moment, I believe we are not eligible for a grant and any other form of financial assistance. Cameramen typically have around £50,000 worth of equipment that is financed. Are there any thoughts about how we could be helped? I currently shop for my father, who is 88, and neighbours who are self-isolating due to being vulnerable. I'm also registered with the NHS as a driver. Yours sincerely, Stephen Macon. Sorry, that was quite a long question, Stephen. I hope I did justice to it and made a couple of mistakes. Apologies, but you get the thrust, I think, Sir Geoffrey.
So, Stephen, this was an almost identical question to somebody earlier on as to what is the technical difference between people operating as a self-employed business rather than as a limited company. And I undertook to take that away. I cannot see the logic or what the logic would be to help self-employed and not small limited companies, but I can't give you that definitive answer now. But again, if you give me your details, I'll take it away and find you an answer.
Okay. This question is from Gemma Swan. My husband and I run a limited company where we pay ourselves a mix of salary and dividends, so it's in a similar vein. Have paid corporation tax plus tax on our dividends and completed our tax returns on time. It would appear we are not eligible for any support at this time. We also have a 5-month-old daughter. Why have we been forgotten?
Well, I've explained the issue on dividends, and I've no doubt from the interest in this particular online session, the number of people who have asked questions about dividends. I've given a part of an answer is the difficulty protecting against fraud. Part of the answer is that you pay lower tax on dividends, not say you don't pay tax, referring to Steve Machin's point, but you pay lower tax than if you'd taken it out as earnings. The Chancellor felt in making this announcement the dividends were not going to be covered, but I can see we're going to get a lot of representations about this, and we'll just have to see what happens in the next few days, and I'll make the point clearly to the Chancellor's team.
Okay, this question is from Lizzie. I want to ask if you can tell me if he thinks people who have second homes in the Cotswolds are allowed to come. I read he said they should, but aren't we supposed to be staying at home to stop the spread and save lives? This is about all of us staying home, not the politics of having second homes. Thanks, Lizzie.
So, Lizzie, I did answer that earlier on. I think that we've got to be... Those people already here, it would make no sense to tell them to go back to wherever their main home was. For those that are thinking about coming to the Cotswolds, I think they must now heed the government advice very clearly and see and think very carefully whether their journey is absolutely necessary and whether it is the right thing to do to come from an area of high population where they might have been in contact with the disease, to come to the Cotswolds with the possibility of having the disease and putting further strain on the already potentially overstretched authorities here. So I think the advice now is, with the government refining the advice every day, with shutting down of the property market transactions, with making it clear that short-term letting Airbnb definitely shouldn't take place, I think people will need to consider very carefully whether they come to their second home in the Cotswolds.
Right. Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. We've run out of time for this live stream, and could I thank everybody for asking their questions, both the ones that came in early and the ones that are coming in on a live stream. I'd also like to apologise for the confusion over a question that I thought was from Ewan, and he's very pointedly said we're here to provide this facility, not to ask questions, but it's just the nature of live streaming and being live.
But he's very welcome to ask questions.
He is indeed. And I'd just like to thank you again, Sir Geoffrey, for making yourself available today, and delighted that people are starting to use this wonderful live streaming facility from the Barn Theatre, for which we're extremely grateful yet again, and that we hope to continue this, and the questions are going to be eligible from both residents and from members of the public, members of the public and from businesses going forward, and just keep on asking the questions, and Sir Geoffrey will continue to try and answer them. And meanwhile, can I wish you all a very safe and pleasant weekend, enjoying the weather, but staying in and adhering to the guidelines. And also I'd like to wish our Prime Minister good health. It's really sad to know that he's also tested positive for the virus, and I hope that he is in good health, and grateful to him for all his efforts. But he did point out on his message earlier today that we shouldn't just be thanking the NHS, we should also be thanking lots of other people who are looking after us. Like, for example, the guys who collected our dustbins today. They're taking a huge risk in doing that. So let's remember, the NHS is fantastic, but everybody else that's keeping this country running. And last but by no means least, the Barn Theatre for all their support for our community. Thank you very much for listening.
So I can't let David have the last word.
No, you can't.
And so I would like to reiterate what he has said, particularly the thanks to everybody in the Cotswolds who has in any way looked after the community, whatever it is that you're doing. Please stay safe. Please follow the government guidelines. And I hope as many people as possible manage to avoid this dreadful virus. If you do unfortunately catch it, let us hope that the National Health Service is able to look after you as well as possible. I'd also like to pay tribute not only to the Prime Minister who's got corona, but also to our very hard-working Health Secretary, Mac Hancock, and wish them both Godspeed and a quick recovery so that they can keep on doing what I think has been a sterling job in helping the whole of this country through this dreadful, what is really a national crisis with an invisible enemy. And the more we all pull together and follow the guidelines, the quicker we'll get over and past this dreadful problem. Thank you for listening.